These guys here can hear it. Or...
Hello. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm Dan Bloom, a political editor at Politico, and I'm joined by the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. So thank you very much for coming in. This is going to be a slightly more hastened session because I think you've got a hard stop, but we're going to get through some pub chat,
okay,
and then go to a question or two in the room if we have time.
Pub chat, what does that involve? We'll find out.
Well, why don't I ask you what your favourite party you've been to this week is?
The favourite party so far that I've been to? That is a good question. I think yesterday evening, the 1922 committee party up in some sort of roof garden in the middle of Manchester was pretty good. But as always, the spectator party tomorrow is one to look out for.
Okay, I won't try and promote our own one, but you've been doing some generic style or some Chris Philp style.
No, he's been
videos.
Doing Chris Philp style videos.
Indeed. Who wore it better?
Who what? Sorry.
Who wore it better? Who did it better?
I think we both did equally well. I think the videos we've done over the summer have cut through. Whether it was Robert with Fare Dodgers or my visit to an asylum hotel where I discovered Deliveroo and Just Eat bikes being used by illegal immigrants for illegal working, or the visit I paid to the organised gang of Romanian beggars and pickpockets living on Park Lane, or my trip to Dunkirk in August, where I was chased around the migrant camp in Dunkirk by a machete-wielding people smuggler.
What have you got planned next? Kind of how important?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to reveal any upcoming trade secret plans, lest they are emulated by anyone else. But I've got quite a few other tricks up my sleeve for the near future.
I want to ask you about protests a little bit. You know, the government was talking about restricting, cumulative protests at the weekend. You've talked about wanting to restrict static protests as well as ones that go on marches, right? Like, how much further should this power be taken than that, do you think? Is there stuff that you are thinking about saying that you'd like to see that goes more than what you've said already? You know, where are you on this?
Oh, so you're inviting me to break news in the Politico's
Pub. That's the start. But I mean, what is your thinking around it? Is your thinking that you would like to go further generally? So
look, I think when Shabana Mahmood, my new opposite number, on my second Home Secretary already and counting, announced the plans yesterday, I did come out and support them, and so did Kemi, because we do think, taking into account the cumulative impact of protests happening again and again and again and again, should be taken into account when deciding whether protests should be allowed or not, and in particular whether they have an intimidatory effect on some communities, in particular the Jewish community, to be honest. I would also go further in this way. I would say that if someone who is not a British citizen is guilty of inciting racial or religious hatred, including anti-Semitism, if they express support or sympathy for extremism, or if they express support or sympathy for violence or terrorism, they should be deported if they're not a British citizen. And I don't think that is something the Labour government are currently proposing to do, but in office we would do that.
So people who are British citizens, a lot of them are going along to these Palestine action protests, essentially. They're holding up banners, they're being arrested by police. Police have got a big crunch moment coming up where the prosecutors and the courts have, where they're going to have to decide how hard or otherwise to throw the book at hundreds and hundreds of people. Now, the maximum sentence for support for a prescribed organisation, as you'll know, is 14 years in jail. How far do you think would you like to see the courts going with people who, for example, turn up and say, I support Palestine action?
Yeah, so that the court will take into account kind of a range of things. One is severity, the other is so-called culpability. So culpability would mean if you are one of the ringleaders of that, you'll get a much longer sentence. So, for example, when we had this wasn't in a terrorist context, but when the Just Stop Oil protesters were blocking motorways and blocking streets deliberately a couple of years ago, the guy behind that, Roger Hallam, ended up, I think, getting a pretty significant sentence because he was organising the whole thing. He was extremely culpable. So those people who are organising these protests in breach of the law should get longer sentences. Someone who isn't an organiser but just shows up obviously is less culpable. And in terms of seriousness, obviously Palestine action, is not the same as Hamas, clearly, and that will get accounted for as well. But the court should be passing a sentence. The ringleaders, come down like a ton of bricks. I would suggest a significant custodial sentence is appropriate because they're deliberately organising a breach of the law. People that just show up, there should be a sentence of some kind. Maybe it'll be a fine, for example. But there should be some consequence if you break the law, for sure.
There's some suggestion that there's a lot of police discretion in how to deal with this. They could, in theory, kind of give fixed penalty notices if they want to, but presumably you think for people just holding up a sign, that would be the wrong.
No, I think if someone has gone out to set out to break the law and express sympathy for an organisation that's been prescribed, so banned as a terrorist organisation under the Terrorism Act, then I think it is right they get properly arrested and the court decides what the appropriate sentence is.
I want to ask about the immigration plans, the deportation plans that were announced on Sunday. So you very deliberately called it ICE-style plans, like the US. What other kind of inspiration can we take? What can we learn from the US? What do you think they're doing well?
So I discussed this last August with Vice President J.D. Vance in his Cotswolds hangout, which was very nice, although surrounded by unbelievable levels of security, including a bloke on the lawn with a sniper rifle.
So it pointed at you?
No, it was lucky. I was well behaved, so I didn't get pointed at by a sniper rifle, luckily. So the US have had an incredibly successful 6 or 8 months on border control. So under the Biden administration, they had every month tens of thousands of people entering the United States from Mexico across that 3,000-mile land border. Within just a few months of the second Trump administration starting, those numbers came down by 80 or 90%, which shows you it can be done. You should ask Tony Abbott about this as well, because Australia did the same thing in 2013 with Operation Sovereign Borders, where they, just like America, people arriving illegally got removed, right? Either back to their country of origin if possible, or to a third place if not. Australia used Nauru. We propose to use Rwanda or somewhere similar. America have done it, and it's worked. It's worked in Australia. It's worked in America. It will work here as well. So the principles that the Trump administration have applied, we would apply here. If you enter the country illegally, you are going to get removed pretty much immediately.
Of course, we've got Tony Abbott on at 3 o'clock, so stick around. But do you think ICE is getting the balance right in how it's been dealing with these cases?
Yeah, look, there are some examples in the US where they have clearly used tactics that are too heavy-handed, and families have been separated. We don't advocate that sort of approach, but we do advocate zero tolerance for illegal immigration, and anyone entering this country illegally, no matter what their purported excuse, will get removed within a week. And we can do that because we're going to come out of the ECHR, as you may have heard, and we've got this plan to strip away all the rest of the legal architecture, which prevents us removing people here illegally and foreign criminals, which means getting rid of immigration legal aid, abolishing the immigration tribunal, so these decisions get taken in the Home Office, and getting rid of legal aid entirely for immigration cases, and also banning asylum claims by people who enter the country illegally.
I want to ask you about some of that, but what other tips did J.D. Vance give you? What did he pass on?
What did he pass on? Well, we debated Ukraine quite a bit, as you can imagine. We talked about how you can...
Did you tell him stand up for Ukraine more, or what was...
I mean, it was a very friendly conversation, but I did explain why I felt it was important the West collectively defends and protects Ukraine, on the basis that if you appease a dictator, an expansionist dictator like Putin, he'll just keep coming. It would be Moldova next, then Georgia. Who knows what he'd do afterwards? And we discussed geopolitics more widely, and other dictators around the world who may feel emboldened if they see the West show weakness on Ukraine. So we just debated those issues around the table.
Do you think the US has heard that message? Because we've talked for months about security guarantees for Ukraine, and there was that big summit in the Oval Office in August, and it seems like things haven't really moved that far from there, as far as we can.
Well, so we did discuss the question of whether, if there was a peace deal at some point, the extent to which Putin could be trusted to respect and honour it, and I made the case that he couldn't, and we talked about some of the things Putin's done in the past. I think there has been a bit of a move. You've seen President Trump in the last week or two talking about supporting Ukraine more. I think from what I can see, from where I'm sitting, President Trump's patience with Vladimir Putin appears to be expiring. So we'll see how that develops.
It's one of Americanism I want to ask you about that Reform UK have actually kind of toyed with a little bit. They've talked about not so much ending as sort of reducing civil service impartiality in some way. So bringing in more of their own people into the civil service, whether it's like lots of special advisors instead of civil servants or whatever, because their argument is that civil servants are like a block on getting stuff done. Now, you've been in the Home Office and all the rest of it. Like, would you be in favour of that sort of idea?
Yeah, so just firstly on reform and Russia, since you put the thought into my mind, I'm quite troubled that Nigel Farage has previously said he admires Vladimir Putin. He said that he played a blinder in Syria, even though Putin supported Assad to use chemical weapons against his own people. And last year, I think Nigel Farage said that it was Ukraine's fault they got invaded. So I have some deep misgivings about Reform's position on Russia since you raised both of those things. On the civil service impartiality question, it is pretty difficult when, the Home Office has about 50,000 civil servants. And when you're in there as a minister, there are about 4 or 5 Commons ministers and about 4 special advisors. So there are essentially about 9 or 10 essentially politically appointed people, and there are 50,000 civil servants. And if someone has joined the civil service to work in the asylum department, they're probably doing that from a perspective of wanting to give asylum to people. So it did at times feel like a bit of a struggle. And it wasn't the case for all bits of the Home Office. I would like to sort of make that clear. So there were some people in immigration enforcement who had views that were much more aligned to ours. And in the police bit of the Home Office, we were all very much on the same side as well. I think more political appointees, particularly at the top, actually would help. And people being appointed from outside the public sector who can bring a bit of dynamism to bear. Difficult because civil service salaries are not comparable to people who are at the top of the corporate ladder. Like a chief executive of a significant private sector company will be getting paid like 5 or 6 times more than an equivalent civil servant. So that is challenging. But I think more outside blood and more political infusion would actually help ministers of any political party get things done.
Are we talking about, like, what sort of numbers are we talking about? Like 1 or 2, or like sort of dozens in order to get them into the directors of the department?
Yeah. So I think in America it's thousands, isn't it? When the American administration changes over, there are literally, I think it's 5 or 10,000 people in the federal government basically switch over. I wouldn't suggest anything on that scale, but in a department like the Home Office, there might be, and some people in there, civil servants, do a great job, work hard, and diligently execute what ministers want them to do. But I could imagine, a few dozen people coming into a big department would make quite a big difference to ministers' ability to get things done. And on that topic, we need to massively rein in judicial review. Obviously, we said we're going to scrap it for immigration, but more widely, we need to rein in judicial review because the government ministers constantly get overridden by the courts for, frankly, pretty ridiculous reasons. When I was immigration minister, I was JR'd more than any other minister in government, which I take as a badge of significant honour. And we also need to take arm's length bodies and pull them back inside. So bodies like, Natural England, for example, exercise very significant influence while being outside of ministerial oversight or control, rather.
Some of these are your ideas, and what I was asking about is a sort of reform idea. Reform are where they are in the polls, and you are where you are in the polls, and you're trying to turn that around. If you can't, or if there's a kind of clear, right and centre-right kind of majority, if you like, in Parliament, would you rule out some kind of pact, some kind of deal, or working with reform in some way?
Well, Kemi has been very clear and said no, that's not on the cards, and actually not. And I agree with Kemi. And Nigel Farage has also been very clear that he doesn't want to do a deal either. So it's currently, it's not on the table, and we're working hard to make sure we get our positive plans across. And I think the move on the ECHR, the Climate Change Act, the Borders Plan we talked about earlier, the stuff on getting taxes down today, all of that is strong stuff. And I think it's also properly thought through, unlike many of Reform's policies, which are, I'm not sure I should say this here, but, dreamt up in a pub and written on the back of a fag packet. Whereas our policies are properly thought through.
Well, here's one thing you can dream up in a pub. Yeah. You were in the Home Office. The Conservatives have made a big deal of the China spying case that was dropped, and there seemed, the thing at the centre of it seems to be whether officials, including Jonathan Powell, met and basically made it clear that the government is not describing China as an enemy, and therefore charges would not be able to stack up. Do you, having worked in the Home Office, what do you think of this suggestion that this could have happened without ministerial oversight? Were there cases where there was a similar thing and you would have just had to been involved, or do things happen without ministers knowing about it?
I would be astonished. I'd be staggered if this happened without some form of ministerial involvement. Now, that may not have come from the Home Office. In fact, I've been assured privately that the Home Office Home Office ministers were not cited on this. You can make your own judgment about that assurance.
You've been assured by Labour.
I've spoken to Labour people, and I've asked them some questions, and I got that answer in the Home Office. However, I'd be astonished if Jonathan Powell and Ollie Robbins, who apparently authorised this change in government position, which caused the trial to collapse because the government evidence changed between April 2024, when the government gave evidence supporting the prosecution and supporting the categorisation of China as an enemy. By September 2025, a couple of weeks ago, that evidence had changed. Apparently, that was an instruction given by Ollie Robbins and by Jonathan Powell. And I would be astonished, I'd be staggered if the Prime Minister hadn't been cited on that. I can't imagine Jonathan Powell, who's one of Keir Starmer's closest and most senior advisors, would have done that without discussing it with the Prime Minister first. So Keir Starmer now has some very serious questions to personally answer. Did he or did he not discuss this with Jonathan Powell or anyone else? Did Keir Starmer know about this change in position? Did Keir Starmer authorise it? Because what has happened is the government have decided to shift their policy on China, probably for economic reasons, because they're in the process of obviously kowtowing to the Chinese for economic reasons. Did Keir Starmer authorise that? And by so doing, he caused a prosecution of people for espionage conducted on behalf of China to collapse. So Keir Starmer has to answer those questions, I think urgently, and I think it's obviously up to you and your colleagues in the lobby, given Parliament isn't sitting, to put those questions to him.
Well, for now, I'm going to put some very trivial questions to you.
I've got a
quick fire.
I've got a pub quiz question at the end as well, but I'll take your quick questions first.
You want to do your pub quiz question?
Okay, so you're about to ring a division bell, and we're in a pub. So my pub quiz question involving a division bell is this: when the division bell goes in Parliament, you've got 8 minutes to get into the division lobby and vote. And there was a record set. Jonathan can't answer this; he'll know. There was a record set by a Conservative MP in the early 1990s who got from Trafalgar Square into the division lobby to vote in that 8-minute period. Who can guess who that Conservative MP was? Brilliant. So someone said Boris Johnson. He cannot run very fast. It was Sebastian Coe, and who grew up with William Hague in Rotherham. And as William Hague likes to say, if you grew up in Rotherham in the 1970s as a young Conservative and your name's Sebastian, you better learn how to run fast.
I'm going to do some pub-themed ones. What's your favourite drink?
I would say in the summer, it'll be a cold lager like Stella. In the winter, it'll be a bitter like London Pride.
Okay. When did you last get properly drunk?
Properly drunk, that would be, I can't remember. A long time ago.
Connected question, the Theresa May question. What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
The naughtiest, well, blimey. So when I was a student at university at Oxford in the 1990s, O.J. Simpson, you remember him? Came to speak at the Oxford Union, and there was no press. So I was very enterprising. I smuggled a load of recording equipment into the place before the security cordon went up, recorded the entire thing, retrieved the recording devices afterwards, and then sold the recordings to various American news stations for a decent amount of money in cash. And I sold it simultaneously to ABC, NBC, and CBS, all of whom thought they were getting it exclusively.
How much money did you make?
I can't remember. It was in the 1990s, but it was enough to buy quite a few rounds in the student bar for a number of weeks to come.
Okay, that's actually quite a good answer. Final one, Boris Johnson or Liz Truss?
In what context?
Favourite.
Dare I ask? Because
not naughtiest, just favourite.
I mean, probably Boris.
Okay. Well, do we have time for one question from the room? Yes, I'm getting a nod. I see. We've got Patrick, who works for our podcast.
Hi, Patrick from Politico. Are the Tories turning their back on centrist voters who might, for example, be interested in voting Lib Dems, but then hear your quite draconian Trump-inspired deportation policy?
No, I don't think so. So I think voters who might consider voting Lib Dem, for example, actually are as concerned about immigration as anybody else. We saw some polling, which Luke Trill and More in Common did on this, showing that concerns about immigration are widely shared across the country and across different party affiliations. What those voters do want to see are plans that are properly thought out and carefully considered. And in David Wolfson's masterful 200-page report, and in our Borders plan, which is detailed and credible, voters, can see that our plans are detailed, they are credible, they are properly thought out, and they will work in practice, unlike slogans written on the back of a fag packet.
Just to end on a bum note, though, you're promising to...
Don't really have to.
You're promising that people who arrive here legally will be deported within a week.
Yeah.
Illegally will be deported within a week. And there's a phrase in this document that you put out yesterday saying, after illegal immigration has been ended. You're promising to end it all. Why should people believe this stuff from you? Because you had stopped the boats and it just didn't, it didn't happen.
That's our objective, what you just read out. Look, I mean, the last government got things wrong on this, just being completely honest. And we have listened, we have learned, we understand the last government got it wrong. We've changed. I was police minister in the last government, yeah. We've learned, we've changed, and we've come up with a plan that is credible. And that one of the reasons we said we need to leave the ECHR is that in government, we tried to fix this inside the ECHR, and it basically wasn't possible. The current Labour government is tinkering around the edges, and again are constrained because they're in the ECHR, which they have no intention of leaving. The conclusion that I reached personally was that we can't fix these issues in the ECHR. David Wilson's analysis confirms that, which leads to this conclusion. And the fact we are now proposing to leave, and that the party is, and the parliamentary party is pretty much united behind this, should say to the country that we have changed as a party in a very profound way.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're back in 3 minutes at 3 o'clock, so don't go anywhere with Tony Abbott. But thank you very much, Chris Philp.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.